Hello, my name is NJ Franco, and these are my thoughts on the Gnome Cave by James Rolfe, aka the Angry Video Game Nerd, aka avgn, here on YouTube. Now, I do not possess a physical copy of the book. That's because I read it on Kindle Unlimited. But for those of you who don't know, this is what it looks like. And I'll get more on to that in a minute. So the book is about a group of kids who go to this amusement park when they're younger, and in a sense, they get on this ride, but in a sense, at the last minute, they sort of chicken out, and then many years later, 30 years, later, they revisit that park, but it's been shut down, so it's all like decrepit and whatnot. So they essentially break into the park, and some horrific events happen while they're in there. So it's kind of a scary story and whatnot. But that's basically the premise. These kids go into this amusement park when they were kids, and then want to relive some of that nostalgia 30 years into the future. So when I found out that James Rolfe, the angry video game nerd, wrote a book, I was super excited to read that. But once it came out, the initial reviews for that book within the first 24 to 48 hours after it coming out made me kind of hesitant to want to read it myself because honestly, the first few reviews were pretty atrocious. They tore him apart. They were giving like 1 and 2 star reviews and saying all these horrible things. Like the POV jumping was confusing, and that there was a lot of tell versus show instead of show versus tell and stuff like that. So I was hesitant to read the book initially, but then when I found out that it was on Kindle Unlimited, I'm like, well, I already got a Kindle Unlimited subscription. I'm not losing anything by really reading it. So let me read it on Kindle Unlimited and see how that goes. Again, that's why I don't have a physical copy, and I decided to read it on Kindle Unlimited instead. So I went ahead and took a chance with the book because at this point, I almost became kind of curious of how bad can it really be. So I took the chance, and honestly, it wasn't that bad. It really wasn't. I actually really enjoyed the book. So the two major complaints that I saw from the first initial wave of reviewers were, like I said, there was a lot of tell versus show, and I also disagree. I think James Rolfe did a very good job of describing the scenes. I had no issues like visualizing what was going on. So I think he had plenty show versus tell, like an acceptable amount, maybe even more than what would be considered average or whatnot. So I totally disagree on the lack of show versus tell. Also, the POV jumping, that was the other complaint that a lot of people had, was there was a lot of POV jumping. It got kind of confusing on who was talking and what was going on, and flashing back to the past and stuff like that. And honestly, I didn't have too much trouble figuring out what was going on and stuff like that as far as POVs and what the timeline was. There was one time, but after reading like 2 or 3 paragraphs, I'm like, oh, okay, now I see what's going on. It's this person talking now. Okay, I understand. And in my opinion, I think a lot of that POV confusion could have been cleared up with a technique a lot of authors use, which is put like 5 asterisks in between paragraphs. Like, okay, this POV is done, so I'll put some asterisk in to separate it, and then there's a new POV. So that's what I would have done, just putting some asterisks or a line or something to separate the POVs or something. But other than that, I had no problems figuring out what was going on, and I really enjoyed the story, like I said. So now that I've expressed my opinions on the initial wave of reviews, which, by the way, the reviews are starting to bounce back because as of the recording of this video, it stands at 3.6 stars on Amazon and 3 stars even on Goodreads, which ain't great, but it's average. It's not bad, so it's starting to bounce back. But yeah, now that I've expressed my opinions on how I disagree with the initial reviews, here are my additional thoughts on the book. So, first off, the introduction, James Rolfe talks about how he initially wanted to make this story. He's had this story idea for years, and he initially wanted to make it as a movie, a feature-length movie, but financially and logistically speaking, it wasn't going to work out. So he figured, what, I'll just turn it into a book, and maybe one of these days, so at least one, the story is out there, but also maybe someone will then take that book and turn it into a movie, which happens all the time. And me as a fellow author as well, I kind of relate to that. I had these story ideas, and I'm like, I don't have the money or the resources or anything like that to turn these into movies. So I'll turn them into books, and hey, maybe one day they'll get turned into movies. So I really relate to that. And he also mentions how most people, not all people, but most people have story ideas in their head, but are too afraid to take the risk of turning it into a book. When in reality, writing a book comes with no risk. Okay, you write the book. If it does well, great. If it doesn't, whatever. You move on. So the introduction he had talking about his writing journey and whatnot, as an author myself, I really could relate to that. Now, not only does this story relate to me as an author, but it also relates to me as an adult because the majority of the story centers around these four middle aged adults. And James Rolfe at no point specifies what their ages are. He just says that they're in their 40s. But I myself just turned 40 earlier this week, so I feel like I'm right there with them. And that these are also just middle aged nerds in a lot of ways. One of the characters, Adam, he's big into Dungeons and Dragons. I'm big into Dungeons and Dragons. I've been into it ever since I was a kid, and he talks about how he loves D&D, but as he gets older, it gets harder to get sessions going because people are always canceling. They got other responsibilities, kids, marriage, whatever. And I'm like, yes, I'm the same way. I would love to have D&D sessions going, but they're just so hard to work out, and people are always like canceling. And at one point, they even mentioned that he had a D&D session over like video call, like Zoom or something like that. And I'm like, dude, I've been there too. I've done a D&D session over a video call before, and I'm like, I'm right there with him. So I relate to these characters, especially Adam. But not even just Adam, but the main character Dante. He's constantly like reflecting on the present, but also being nostalgic for the past. And I feel that way. I'm always like, I'll be at my job and I'll be like, man, where the heck, has my life gone? And I'll be reminiscing about the past and reflecting at where I am in my life now. And just, yeah, as a now middle-aged adult nerd, I'm just I feel super relatable to this book. Also, another thing about the book that probably shouldn't come as too much of a surprise to anybody is there is a fair amount, well, not a super amount, but there's a fair amount of foul language in the book, considering that it is the angry video game nerd. Anyone who's seen his videos know that he curses a lot. But what kind of surprised me is while there is foul language in the book, I feel that there is significantly less foul language in this book than there is in his average video. Like he was toning it back just a little bit. So I was kind of surprised by that. So there is cursing, just not as much as you would think, considering who the author is. So my only real complaint about the book is the last few chapters that tried to, as they tried to wrap up the story, seemed to kind of drag on, and I just kind of wanted to end it already. And maybe that was because I wanted to get this book finished today, so I was kind of binging it. I'm like, let's get this done. So maybe me spending all day or a good portion of today trying to finish the story, and I was just like, let's just get it done with. Maybe that's why I felt like those chapters dragged on. Maybe if I had taken a break and finished it the next day, I wouldn't have felt that way. But I don't know. But that's my only complaint is the whole once the main event was done and everything was wrapping up, I felt like that kind of dragged on a bit. But I honestly I enjoyed the story. I would give it 4 stars. Above what the average rating on Amazon and Goodreads is right now. I'd give it a 4-star rating. And honestly, I hope James Rolfe writes more books. I know he already wrote one book that's kind of an autobiography. I'm not really interested in that, but if he writes more fiction books, to hell with what the reviews say. I'd probably still read it anyway. Even if the initial reviews were bad, I'd probably still read it anyway. So I really hope James Rolfe writes more fiction books because I would love to read them. But anyway, that's it for me. And as always, thank you for watching.